This happened about 3 years ago when I was living in my first apartment after college. It was a garden-level unit in an older building, nothing fancy, but it was mine and I was proud of it. The rent was cheap enough that I could afford it on my entry-level salary, and the neighborhood seemed safe enough. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to some of the red flags. I had this habit of keeping a spare key hidden outside. I know. Everyone says not to do that, but I'm the kind of person who locks themselves out constantly. I'd hidden it under a decorative rock near the back entrance, one of those fake ones you can buy at any hardware store. It looked convincing enough that I figured nobody would think twice about it. Everything was completely normal for the first 8 months I lived there. I'd come home from work, make dinner, watch some Netflix, and go to bed. Typical young professional routine. But then things started feeling off in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. It started small. I'd come home and feel like something was different, but I could never identify what. Maybe a cabinet door I was sure I'd closed would be slightly ajar, or items in my fridge seemed rearranged. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness, or maybe just being stressed from work. I was pulling a lot of overtime back then, so it made sense that I wasn't remembering things perfectly. But then it escalated. I started noticing that my food was disappearing faster than it should. Not all at once, but gradually. A few slices of bread gone, some lunch meat missing, half a carton of orange juice vanished. Again, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was eating more than I realized. Maybe I'd had friends over and forgotten. The human mind will do anything to avoid accepting something truly disturbing. The night everything came to a head was a Friday in late October. I'd gone out with co-workers for happy hour and got back to my apartment around 9:30. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. There was a smell in the air that wasn't mine. Not a bad smell exactly, just unfamiliar, like someone else's laundry detergent or body wash. I stood in the doorway for a solid minute, just listening. The apartment was silent. I walked through each room, turning on every light, checking every closet and under the bed. Nothing. I was starting to feel ridiculous, like I was being paranoid for no reason. But that smell lingered and it made my skin crawl. I tried to go about my normal evening routine, but I couldn't shake this overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. Every creak of the building settling made me jump. I kept the TV volume low, so I could hear if anything was off. Around midnight, I finally decided to just go to bed, figuring I was psyching myself out over nothing. I woke up at 3:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I looked at my phone immediately. I'd heard something, a sound that didn't belong. It took me a few seconds to place it, but then I realized what it was. Someone was in my kitchen, opening my refrigerator. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear in my ears. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but I was paralyzed with fear. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to do something, anything, but I just lay there in the dark, listening. I could hear footsteps now, soft, deliberate footsteps moving through my apartment. They were coming closer to my bedroom. I watched in absolute horror as my bedroom door, which I'd left slightly ajar, slowly started to open wider. That's when survival instinct finally kicked in. I screamed, not words, just a raw, primal scream of terror. I turned on my bedside lamp and saw a figure standing in my doorway, a man maybe in his 40s, wearing dirty jeans and a stained jacket. He had a sandwich in his hand. My sandwich, made with my food from my kitchen. For a moment, we just stared at each other. His expression wasn't what I expected. He didn't look angry, or threatening. He looked surprised, almost hurt, like I was the one intruding on him. Then he ran, just turned and bolted for the back door. I heard it slam, and I immediately called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. The police arrived quickly and took my statement. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. That's when one of the officers asked me if I kept a spare key hidden anywhere. My stomach dropped. I showed them the fake rock, and sure enough, it was in a slightly different position than I'd left it. The officer explained that people who break into homes often scope them out first, looking for easy entry points. Someone had obviously found my key and had been coming and going as they pleased, probably when I was at work. The thought of this stranger having free access to my home, eating my food, going through my things, maybe even watching me sleep, made me feel violated in a way I can't fully describe. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. The previous tenant had filed a similar report about 6 months before I moved in. Someone had been entering her apartment using the same hidden key spot. She'd moved out shortly after, and the landlord had never mentioned it to me. The police suspected it might be the same person, someone who'd been targeting that specific unit for nearly a year. They advised me to change the locks immediately and to never, under any circumstances, hide a key outside again. I did change the locks, but I also broke my lease and moved out within 2 weeks. I couldn't stay there knowing that someone had been treating my home like their own personal storage unit and restaurant. I still think about that night sometimes. The way he looked at me like I was the intruder. The casual way he'd made himself a sandwich in my kitchen at 3 a.m. I wonder how many nights he'd done that while I slept, completely unaware. The police never caught him, and as far as I know, he could still be out there, finding new spare keys and new victims. I'm a new mom, and this happened when my daughter Emma was about 4 months old. My husband traveled for work frequently, sometimes for weeks at a time, which means I'm often alone with the baby. It's exhausting, but we've managed to make it work. I'd set up a pretty elaborate baby monitoring system because I'm admittedly paranoid about SIDS and all the other terrifying things that can happen to infants. I had one of those smart monitors that connects to your phone via Wi-Fi. It has a camera with night vision, temperature sensors, and even plays lullabies remotely. It costs a fortune, but it gave me peace of mind, especially on the nights when I was by myself. One night, my husband was in Seattle for a conference, and I had just gotten Emma down after a particularly difficult evening. She'd been fussy all day, and I was completely drained. I collapsed on the couch with a glass of wine, just grateful for a few moments of silence. I was scrolling through my phone when I got a notification from the baby monitor app. It said there was movement detected in Emma's room. I pulled up the camera feed and saw her stirring slightly but not crying. I watched for a minute to make sure she wasn't waking up, then closed the app. About 10 minutes later, I got another movement notification. This time when I checked the feed, something felt wrong. The camera angle looked slightly different, like someone had adjusted it. But that was impossible. The camera was mounted on the wall, and Emma certainly couldn't reach it. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that the camera had just shifted slightly on its mount. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Through the baby monitor speaker on my phone, I heard a man's voice, soft and sing-song, saying, "Sleep tight, little one." It wasn't my husband's voice. It wasn't anyone I knew. Someone had hacked into my baby monitor and was talking to my daughter. I ran to Emma's room so fast, I nearly fell down the stairs. I burst through the door and scooped her up, checking every corner of the room even though I logically knew no one was physically there. Emma started crying from being woken up so abruptly, but I didn't care. I held her tight, my whole body shaking. I called the police immediately, but they said there wasn't much they could do since it was a cyber intrusion and no one had physically broken in. They suggested I contact the monitor company and my internet service provider. One officer did come by to check the house and make sure all the doors and windows were secure, which I appreciated, but he basically confirmed what I already knew. Someone had remotely accessed my camera. I unplugged the monitor and spent the rest of the night in Emma's room with every light on, her crib pushed right next to the chair where I sat. I couldn't stop thinking about how long this person might have been watching. Hours? Days? Weeks? The next morning, I called the monitor company. They walked me through securing the device, changing all my passwords, enabling two-factor authentication. All the things I should have done from the beginning, but naively hadn't. The customer service rep mentioned that these hacks were becoming more common, that there were entire forums where creeps shared access to unsecured baby monitors. That made me physically ill. The thought that there could be multiple people out there who'd been watching my daughter sleep, who'd seen me nursing her, who'd heard our most intimate family moments. I felt so violated, so stupid for not taking better security precautions. But the worst part came a few days later. I was going through my email and found something in my spam folder that I'd initially overlooked. It was from an anonymous email address sent the same night as the intrusion. The subject line just said "Sweet Dreams." The email contained screenshots, multiple screenshots from my baby monitor's camera feed, taken over the course of several weeks. There was one of Emma sleeping, one of me standing in her room, facing away from the camera, one of my husband holding her, dozens of them. At the bottom of the email was a single sentence: "You should smile more when you're with her." I showed the police, and they opened an investigation, but they warned me that tracking down the person responsible would be extremely difficult. IP addresses can be masked, and these predators know how to cover their tracks. We moved out of that house 2 months later. I couldn't stand being there anymore, knowing that someone had been virtually present in my daughter's room, watching us. I got rid of all our smart home devices. No more Wi-Fi cameras, no more connected monitors, nothing. I know it's probably an overreaction, but I don't care. Emma is 18 months old now, and we're in a new place with old-fashioned audio-only monitors. My husband thinks I'm being overly cautious, but he wasn't the one who heard that voice. He wasn't the one who saw those screenshots. Sometimes late at night, when I'm watching Emma sleep, I still think about that person sitting somewhere, in some room I'll never know about, watching us through that camera. I wonder they moved on to another family, another baby. I wonder they're still out there, collecting their disturbing little gallery of images. I reported the email to the FBI's Cybercrimes Division, but I never heard back. The case is probably sitting in some filing system somewhere, one of thousands of similar complaints. That's the most frustrating part. This violation, this invasion of my family's privacy and safety, is just another statistic. I'm sharing this story because I want other parents to know how vulnerable these devices can make you. Change your passwords. Enable every security feature. Or better yet, just don't use them at all. The convenience isn't worth the risk. Trust me on that. I bought my first house last year. It's a small 2-bedroom ranch-style place in a suburban neighborhood. Nothing too exciting, but it's mine. Or at least it's supposed to be. The whole process of buying it was smooth. The previous owner had already moved out of state for a job, and the house had been sitting empty for about a month before I closed on it. I'd met the previous owner exactly once during the final walkthrough. His name was Richard, a guy in his mid-50s who seemed pleasant enough. He showed me where the water main shut-off was, which circuit breakers control which rooms, all the standard stuff. He mentioned he'd lived there for almost 20 years and seemed genuinely sad to be leaving. I remember him running his hand along the kitchen counter and saying something like, "This place has a lot of memories." The first few weeks in the house were great. I was doing all the typical new homeowner stuff, painting walls, hanging pictures, arranging furniture. I was finally feeling settled when the first weird thing happened. I came home from work one evening to find my back door unlocked. I was absolutely certain I'd locked it that morning. I'm obsessive about checking locks, always have been, but I figured maybe I'd been distracted and forgotten, so I made a mental note to be more careful and moved on. Then it happened again 3 days later, and again the following week. Each time, just the back door, always unlocked. Nothing was ever missing or disturbed inside, but it was deeply unsettling. I started taking photos of the locked door before I left for work, just to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed, figuring maybe the previous owner had given spare keys to neighbors or family members and someone was accidentally using the wrong key. The locksmith did the work on a Friday afternoon, and I felt relieved knowing I was the only person with keys now. That relief lasted exactly 2 days. On Sunday morning, I discovered my basement door wide open, not just unlocked, but actually standing open. I hadn't even been down to the basement yet. The previous owner had left a bunch of storage items down there that I had been meaning to sort through, and I had just been avoiding it. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly went down the stairs, my heart pounding. The basement was cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and random household items. Everything looked undisturbed, but there was something off about the space. It felt like someone had been there recently. That's when I noticed one of the boxes had been opened, not violently torn open, but carefully unsealed, like someone was looking for something specific. Inside were photo albums. I pulled one out and flipped through it. They were all pictures of Richard and his family. Birthday parties, holidays, vacations. Normal family photos. But why would someone break into my house just to look at old photos? I called the police and filed a report. They did a sweep of the house and found no signs of forced entry, which made no sense since I just changed all the locks. The officer suggested maybe I'd left the basement door open myself and forgotten, but I knew that wasn't true. After the police left, I decided to go through more of the boxes in the basement, thinking maybe I could figure out what the intruder was looking for. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Old Christmas decorations, books, board games. But then I found something that made my stomach turn. In one of the boxes was a journal. A handwritten journal with Richard's name inside the front cover. I know I shouldn't have read it, but I couldn't help myself. The entries were mostly mundane. Daily observations, thoughts about work, memories of his kids growing up in the house. But the entries from the last few months before he moved were different. He wrote about how he didn't want to leave, how the house was all he had left after his divorce, and his kids moving away, how he felt like he was being forced out by circumstances beyond his control. The entries became increasingly desperate, talking about how the house was part of him and how he couldn't just let it go. The final entry, dated 2 days before my closing, sent chills down my spine. I know I'll find a way back. This house will always be mine, no matter who thinks they own it. I immediately tried to find contact information for Richard. I called the real estate agent who'd handled the sale, but she said she'd lost touch with him after closing and didn't have a forwarding address. I tried searching for him online, but came up empty. For the next week, I was a nervous wreck. I installed security cameras, got a deadbolt for the basement door, and started sleeping with my bedroom door locked. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that the journal entries were just the sad thoughts of someone going through a difficult transition. Then I woke up one night to the sound of someone walking around downstairs. I grabbed my phone and called the police while hiding in my bedroom closet. I could hear the footsteps moving through the house slowly, deliberately, cabinet doors opening and closing, water running in the kitchen sink. The sound of someone who knew exactly where everything was. The police arrived within minutes. I heard the footsteps suddenly rush toward the back of the house, then the slam of the back door. When the officers came upstairs to get me, they said someone fled out the back, but they'd lost him in the dark. The back door had been unlocked from the inside. Whoever was had gotten in somehow, but there were still no signs of forced entry. The officers searched the house thoroughly and found something disturbing in the basement. One of the ceiling tiles had been pushed aside, revealing a small crawl space I didn't know existed. Inside that crawl space was a sleeping bag, some bottled water, and a flashlight. Someone had been living in my house, hiding in the crawl space during the day and coming out at night. And based on everything else, I was pretty sure I knew who it was. The police took the journal and the items from the crawl space as evidence. They finally located Richard living in a motel about 40 minutes away. When they questioned him, he initially denied everything, but they found a key to my house in his possession. Not one of the old keys I had changed, but a brand new key that matched my new locks. Turns out Richard had broken in the day before I'd changed the locks and made copies of new keys while I was at work. He'd been coming and going freely ever since, sleeping in my basement crawl space, using my shower when I wasn't home, eating my food. Basically, he'd never actually left his house. He'd just learned to coexist with me without my knowledge. Richard was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, trespassing, and stalking. His lawyer tried to argue that he was having a mental health crisis following his divorce and job loss, which might be true, but it doesn't change what he did. The violation of knowing he'd been living in my house with me, watching me, listening to me, is something I don't think I'll ever fully get over. I've since had the entire house rekeyed again, sealed up that crawl space, and installed a comprehensive security system. But I still don't feel completely safe here. Every creak of the house settling makes me wonder if he somehow got back in. Every shadow makes me jump. I've thought about selling the house and moving, but part of me refuses to let him win. This is my house, not his. But I'd be lying if I said I don't sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and wonder if he's standing somewhere in the darkness, watching me, waiting for his chance to reclaim what he thinks is his. The court case is still pending. Richard's currently out on bail with a restraining order keeping him away from my property. But a piece of paper doesn't make me feel safe. Nothing really does anymore. I guess the moral of the story is that when you buy a house, you're not just buying the building. Sometimes you're inheriting someone else's emotional baggage too. And in my case, that baggage came with a very real, very disturbing human component that refuses to let go.